On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Kirill Kaprizov on injured reserve. Guess who got called up to replace him and Jared Spurgeon?
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day. And we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we'll talk about a couple of procedural moves for the Wild as Kirill Kaprizov officially put on injured reserve. Carson Lambos getting the call for the Wild to take the place of Jared Spurgeon. And we'll also hear from John Hynes, some of his thoughts on the recent play of Declan Chisholm and Rossi filling some big shoes in the Minnesota Wild lineup. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild since 2021, and hope you had a good new year. I've been in recovery mode most of the day, just, celebrated what has been a very eventful year and just took the day to kind of sit back and watch some football. And now it's time to get back to business because the Minnesota Wild officially put Kirill Kaprizov on injured reserve. Now, it is a retroactive appointment to injured reserve, and obviously, we don't have a ton of information as to what is going on, but it has been speculated by The Athletic that it is a groin injury that Kirill Kaprizov is dealing with at this point. And the groin injury thing is kind of concerning because those obviously can linger beyond simply healing up. But bottom line with however long Kirill is going to miss, the prize is at the end of the season. And the Wild have done a good job of banking early points to put themselves in position to be able to weather the storm and to navigate this. And honestly, and I'm never going to do the whole, it's actually better that Kirill is out of the lineup than in it, because it's obviously better if Kaprizov is in the lineup than out. But what this does is this provides an opportunity for somebody within the rest of the lineup to step up and to try to get the scoring back on track and ignited. We saw Rossi take the lead against the Nashville Predators. More on him coming up in a little bit. But when you take away your number one scoring option, somebody is going to have to take the lead. The shot pie chart is different. So who's going to be the one to step up and be able to take the lead? I look at a guy who now is the third scoring option on this team, at least statistically, after Rossi passed him up, thanks to a 2-goal, 3-point effort against the Nashville Predators. And now, by the way, Rossi is on pace for a 30-goal, 69-point campaign in 82 games. This is a great opportunity for Matt Boldy to get himself back to where his numbers were at the early part of the season. It's been a little bit of a lengthy scoring drought for Boldy. We know that he is a player that tends to run hot and cold, but since the game against Edmonton on November 21st, Boldy's got 2 goals, and his last goal came on the 14th against Philly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 straight without a goal. If Kirill is going to miss any additional time than he has currently not been in the lineup, the hope would be that sparks Boldy to get back to where he was at last year when this happened. Remember in the month or two, a couple of years ago, I think it was 2 years ago. Remember when Kirill missed about 20 games thanks to Brendan Dillon? Boldy stepped in. He had, I think, a 13-goal month of March as the number one option. And I think something that has been pointed out in the comment section that is definitely worth repeating is it's not so much that Boldy is not capable of carrying a line. Just look at the players that he's on a line with. It's one thing to have Kirill Kaprizov carry a line because he is capable of doing it, and he's had all different types of players that he has played with over the course of his career. But Matt Boldy on the other end, you put him with a player who right now is in a bit of a drought himself. You put him with Ryan Hartman as the center for that line. That hasn't worked. And Marcus Johansson, same story. You put Boldy with Marco Rossi and Matt Zuccarello, and we've seen the statistics trending in the right direction with that trio. Ultimately, it's the same thing that we have been dealing with for a large part of the season. Of the top 6, you probably have 4 guys that are really capable of playing in that type of a role. Zuccarello, Kaprizov, Boldy, Eriksson Ek, and Rossi. So you've got 5. With Kirill out, you've got 4. And all the other guys that have been tried in that spot is just playing people out of position. Just not suited for those types of roles, not suited for that type of production. Any production that has been generated by being in those spots is kind of an anomaly. So you've got 6 chairs to fill and 5 people to fill them, or 4 in this case. So that, I think, is a portion of why some of Boldy's numbers have dipped. And obviously the chemistry that he has put together with Joel Eriksson Ek. But I think the thing that would really help Boldy is just doing a lot of what Marco Rossi has done over the last few weeks. And this is something that I think will lead to... Now, Marco Rossi was on a little bit of a goal drought. He scored against the Florida Panthers on the 18th, then went 5 games without a goal. But 5 games is one thing. 8 is a little bit longer of a stretch. Rossi's longest goal drought of the season is 7 games. That was early on in the season. But you know why Marco Rossi is able to consistently get out of those droughts, and why we don't talk about his lack of scoring as much as we do, say, Boldy, is because Rossi is doing other things to impact the game on a nightly basis. Had Rossi not scored the 2 goals last night, we probably would have applauded the fact that he was 12 of 15 in the faceoff circle, or that he aggressively battled on the boards, things along those lines. So if you're not scoring, what are you doing to impact the game otherwise? That's the big question. That's the multi-million-dollar question that we seek to get an answer for every game of the schedule. And I think if Matt Boldy just takes a page out of Marco Rossi's book, I've heard this mentioned that in order for Boldy to get out of this little drought, probably going to have to get a couple of really greasy goals. You know how you get really greasy goals? Crash the net. Just take the fight to the net, and whether it be a deflection or a tip in or something along those lines, getting to the net is always the answer. And Marco Rossi has done it. And if Matt Boldy takes a page out of that book, I think that's going to allow him to break this stretch and to get himself back on track. Although, to be fair, if you're going to have one stretch like this during the season, I would much rather it be right now than at the end of the year. So just go to the net. Go to the net, get in deep, and get a couple of goals and get yourself back on track is the mode of the plan for Boldy here going forward. But we're going to talk about this notion of players stepping up to take charge in the wake of Kirill Kaprizov's absence. Well, Marco Rossi gets the award for that in the game against Nashville. I mean, 2 goals, an assist, 7 shots on goal, and 12 of 15 in the faceoff circle. He did a little bit of everything, which led to John Hynes saying some pretty nice things about where his game is at right now. We'll talk about that coming up, but we'll first discuss the defenseman that is getting the call to replace Jared Spurgeon in the lineup, at least on a short-term basis for this road trip. And it is not David Jiricek. Carson Lambos getting the call. We'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. Personally, I love checking out which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score for those ultimate thrills. And coming up this weekend, Vikings, Lions, Sunday Night Football. At last check, the over was at somewhere around 57.5. Take the over. If you want my expert opinion, take the over in that game every day of the week. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, appreciate all of you for helping make it another banner year for Locked on Wild. Just ran the numbers. We had 300,000 YouTube views over the course of the year, 800 plus new subscribers, and all told, I think it was just short of 600,000 combined audio and video listens, which is pretty nice year for the show, and we will continue to push those numbers up and up here into 2025 as well. I will do a postcast tonight, have a basketball game that will hopefully be done around 9:30-ish. So it may be a little later than we typically go since the game starts at 6, but we will still have a postcast for you after the game against the Washington Capitals. So you can tune in for that coming up here later tonight on YouTube. Let's talk about the names that were recalled for the road trip. The Minnesota Wild were calling both Brendan Gaunce and Carson Lambos to join the team for the road trip. This one surprised me. I'm going to be 100% honest. I figured it was going to be David Jiricek that got the call for the Wild in order to fill Jared Spurgeon's spot in the lineup. And it would have made sense. Spurgeon, a right shot. Jiricek, also a right shot. And as the roster stands right now, you've got Bogosian, a right shot. Brodin, Chisholm, both left shots. Faber's a right shot. Merrill is a left shot. So what it's likely going to be is Merrill and Bogosian as your third pairing. I would imagine it will be Faber and Brodin as the top pair. And Chisholm and Lambos, or Faber and Chisholm, Brodin and Lambos. Some combination like that is what we will see against the Washington Capitals and potentially the Carolina Hurricanes as well. Now, you do have Travis Dermott still as well, so he could potentially slot into the lineup also. To be fair, Dermott looked good in his initial action with the Minnesota Wild, so he could certainly slot in to fill one of those spots as well. Somebody asked why not Jiricek, and the Wild, Michael Russo responded that the Wild just didn't want to have, they just didn't want to have a rookie defenseman playing out of position in the lineup. So I guess the thought is that a player like Chisholm has played enough games at the NHL level that he would be able to handle that type of switch as opposed to having Jiricek do it. But the thing that I was kind of confused by is it seems just pretty standard plug and play to put Jiricek in Spurgeon's spots on his side. But I don't know. These are the things that go into these moves that just are another good reason as to why I'm not a coach or a GM. So we'll just have to see how this plays out. And Russo also said if Lambos debuts tomorrow, I'd assume left shot Jonas Brodin or Declan Chisholm moves to the right side. And you're bringing up Brendan Gaunce as well, who had a hat trick for Iowa as a player that can, slot into the lower part of the lineup. But what does Carson Lambos bring to the table? Well, let's look at some of the things that he has done so far this year in Iowa. From a points perspective, not a ton. He's got 2 goals and 3 assists, 5 total points in 27 games played. He had 14 points last year and in 69 games, and 64 penalty minutes in the 69 games last year. 85 shots on goal in 69 games. This year he's got 26 shots in 27 games played, but just 7 penalty minutes in 27 games. And they all came in one game. They all came in one game against, I'm assuming that was the Barracuda that they played. And if I recall, one of those games went really wonky. So other than that, he has played some pretty responsible hockey. Is not somebody that's going to commit, at least so far this year, is not somebody that's going to commit penalties, which is something that can really help the Minnesota Wild. And this is his first opportunity to get to the NHL level. So I think what this tells me is that the Minnesota Wild have, and this is why we have not seen Liam Ogren yet, they have a plan that they put together for these players. when they get to the NHL level, they get a few games under their belts. The coaching staff and probably Bill Guerin as well put a plan together of these are the things that we want to see you work on at the AHL level. And we're just going to do that for X amount of time. And we're going to evaluate after a determined amount of time and kind of see where things are at. So I saw a lot of reaction on social media of people saying, oh, great that we gave up a first-round pick for a guy who's not even good enough to get called up to see where he's at. And I'm choosing to trust the process here. I'm choosing to trust the long-term play. Juracek has a very, very good future ahead of him. The Wild want to see him get a bunch of games under his belt and just not have to worry. Because, like, think about this. If you are put in a position where it's like, okay, if you perform good enough, you're going to get called up, then players may be pressed too much to where their performance is impacted because they're really, really trying to do, they're trying like above and beyond to be good enough to get a call up. And I think with these guys, the Wild want them to just play their game. Like, don't worry about putting pressure on yourself or stressing yourself out to make a call up. Like, your time is still going to come. Just worry about the process, worry about the results, and just put some good games together. Juracek did score against in the Iowa Wild game. A nice rocket shot from the top of the zone. And from what I have been told, his game has, he's had some pretty solid performances so far this year. Has had, he's had some games that have been more on the downside, but has, I think, done pretty good so far within the Minnesota Wild organization. In fact, all told, in 13 games, he's got 5 points, also has 13 penalty minutes in the 5 games. So I think that's part of it as well, is you want to see some of the you want to see some of those things cleaned up a little bit. He has 2 points with Iowa so far in 9 games and 11 penalty minutes. So I think the Wild want to see some of that stuff get cleaned up a little bit before he gets his chance. And with Lambos playing as responsibly as he has, I think that's the reason that he got the nod for this opportunity as opposed to Spacek. Yeah, Lambos has not committed a penalty since November 2nd. And that's a lot of games that have been played. He scored against Rockford on the 28th, and he's from what I think Ron told me this, is that after Damon Hunt was traded, Lambos got elevated to top pairing in Iowa. So he's been logging some good minutes. We'll see how he slots in, and he will be the next kind of that next wave of players getting his first taste of NHL hockey, which is super exciting as well. I want to finish by talking about John Hynes, who had some pretty nice things to say about both Declan Chisholm and Marco Rossi. So we'll hear from Hynes, and we'll break down what he had to say about 2 young players really putting in some quality extra work. That is on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. And folks, I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert. It was Kenny Chesney at US Bank Stadium with just a solid atmosphere. And I was able to just worry about the concert experience. Didn't have to stress about the tickets, thanks to Game Time. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get your tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets and can focus on what you should focus on, which is the pre or post-event experience and just making it a night to remember or a great time with your friends. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Reminder for you, we will have a postcast after the game tomorrow against the Capitals. Releasing this episode late on New Year's Day, but we'll have an episode for you in the morning as well. And we will have a postcast. It might be a little later than we typically go, but we will still crack the mic for you after the game against the Capitals. We'll have more of a preview of that game coming up for you tomorrow. I want to finish with some comments that John Hynes had after the game against the Nashville Predators regarding two players who have really stepped in and stepped up with key pieces out of the lineup and just needing somebody to step in and to give some quality minutes. And so let's hear John Hynes' thoughts about both Marco Rossi and Declan Chisholm.
What have you seen from Rossi recently? I know he's 80% on the face-off dot tonight too, but stepping up his game, what have you seen from him?
I think he's done a really good job in the face-off circle. He really digs in, and that's a big part of his game. He's playing tenacious. I think his battle level is high everywhere. He's playing a speed game, and he's getting to the scoring areas. Where he scores a lot of times, it's in and around the net. And now you see him there more and more consistently, and that goes back to his competitive nature. And I think when you have the type of skill and hockey sense that Marco has and the speed, when you combine that with his competitiveness and his work ethic on a very consistent basis, that's why he's been really, he's really taken his game to another level.
You've seen Chisholm really lean into one from the blue line. Just how much fun are those plays to watch, and what is he kind of emerging? What does that mean for you right now?
Yeah, it's nice to see Chisholm be able to do that. He does have good offensive instincts. He's got a good shot. He's got good mobility. And I think when you see him, on the blue line, he's getting his shots through. He's got a great shot, but he's able to get them through. And it's nice to see him be able to get rewarded for the hard work he's put in too. He's growing as a player, and we're counting on him more and more, and he's done a good job.
And these young players, that's part of the process too. Is I don't think we can emphasize enough how rare it is to have guys like Matt Boldy and Brock Faber who jumped in and were good right from the get-go. That doesn't happen regularly. That's not the trends. That's not the rule of how rookies typically handle the move from lower levels to the NHL level. There's an adjustment. There's a learning curve. There is growing that needs to be done by young players. And so often what you see is you get a few games under your belt, and then you head down to the AHL or wherever, and you work on things. You put in the time. You do whatever you need to do to get yourself in more of a position to succeed, and you come back, and the hope is that whatever you did works to the point that you're able to become like a reliable contributor. Think about Marco Rossi's first stint in 2022-2023. 19 games. He had 1 assist. He had 13 shots on goal in those 19 games. Was a -7. Was at a 47.3% clip in the faceoff circle. And, there was just kind of some concerns about is he going to be somebody that's going to be able to cut it at the NHL level? Now, I still, to this day, think that he maybe would have been able to do a little better, a little higher in the lineup. But let's remember as well, that was a Minnesota Wild team that was in the thick of a playoff chase. in 2022, 2023. You don't just, unless it's a like top prospect situation, you don't just thrust players into the lineup, because a lot of guys, and think about this on just a normal job perspective too. If you're going into a new job, the first few days or even the first week that you're in that position, you are trying to make sure that you do everything without making mistakes. You're trying to make sure that you do everything and that you put out a good impression, but you're constantly making sure that everything that you do is being done like to a T. And it leads to you, especially in the hockey sense, maybe making some plays or not making some plays that you are perfectly capable of making. You just end up playing timid. And it's not a situation. John Hynes talked about it with Liam Ogren. He said he just needs to play his game. There's no situation where if you make a mistake, you're coming out of the lineup. Just play your game. And the leap that Marco Rossi has taken over the last 2 seasons is a huge testament to the type of player he is, the type of character that he has, the work ethic that he has. Guy almost died. Rossi nearly died and had to work his way back after that. And 82 games last year, a 40-point season, 21 goals, was up until like the last bit of the year where it really became Faber and Bedard for the Calder. He was in the mix for the Calder too. And this year he has gotten even better. This year he has upped it to, like I said, on pace for 30 goals and 69 points in a full 82-game season. He is an absolute bulldog. You can't take him out of the lineup. He's not coming out of the lineup. Every instance in which he has been asked to do a little more for this Wild team, he steps up. He doesn't raise any questions, and he's just willing to do it. Just under now, one face-off win under 50% on the season. Think about that. Think about how much we've been talking about face-offs over the last few years, and now you've got a guy in Marco Rossi who is just under 50% at the dot. And he's not the biggest guy. He comes in, he's 5'9", 182, and he still is able to win at about a 50% clip on the faceoff dot. But I like that John Hynes said that, we're giving them more responsibilities, and they're stepping up to meet the challenge. Declan Chisholm is a great example of that this year. And he is being asked to fill a lot on defense, and he's doing a really good job with it. That's the next step in the evolution of young players, is you get to where they're comfortable doing a set number of things in the lineup. And then at a certain point you say, okay, let's see if they're capable of handling some more. And there are plenty of guys that can't. They have their one set role and that's it. But there are plenty of other players that say, yeah, I can do that. I can handle that. And Marco Rossi's one. Think about being the number one center, the top line center on this team for a good majority of the season. He's handled that, and he is, in a lot of instances, he's going up against guys that have pretty good resumes, pretty good pedigrees, and he just does not run from the challenge. And Declan Chisholm now playing a top 4 role defensively on this team means that you're going to go up against some pretty good opposing players. And he doesn't bat an eye. He does not bat an eye. He welcomes the challenge. And we're seeing a nice continued push in the development for both Rossi and Chisholm. And that's how player development is supposed to be. You get players acclimated at the NHL level, get them comfortable, and then you start to add responsibilities. Now, obviously, if you've got like the number one overall pick, that's kind of a different story. They're going to be doing a lot because of where they were drafted. But Rossi and Chisholm have been, over the last couple of weeks, have been great, and the Wild need them to do that. So who is going to be the next one that steps in over the next few weeks, over the month of January? Who steps in and helps them out? That's the key question that the Wild need to answer here over the next week or two, is either getting somebody going of the current roster and the current offense, getting somebody going, or having somebody unexpected step up. Those are your options. So who do you think will step up for the Minnesota Wild here in the month of January to help out Marco Rossi, Declan Chisholm? Who do you think is going to be the one to step up and help them out in the month of January? Let us know in the comments. And that will do it for today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Locked On Wild has you covered every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.